Welcome to Rogue Insights. Another one bites the dust. Yahya Sinwar, the remaining top leader of Hamas, was killed today by Israeli forces in Rafah, South Gaza, in a military operation. The image you see on the screen to the left of me, provided by the OSINT defender, is the moment that his body was carried out of the rubble. It would seem, based on initial reports, that this was not a planned strike, the type that Bergman talks about in the very excellent book, Rise and Kill First. No, it would seem that Israeli ground forces were fighting a Hamas position somewhere in Rafah. Small arms fire was being directed at the position, and they ordered a tank to fire on it. When they approached the position, and I saw a photo of the cadaver, the corpse, they found that Sinwar was there. We're not going to show that photo for obvious reasons, but if you don't know Sinwar, he is this guy who looks like a villain right out of Central Casting. He was born in 1962 in Khan Yunis, Gaza, and became deeply involved in the Muslim Brotherhood during his youth. He was one of the co-founders of Hamas in 1987. And in 1988, he was imprisoned by the Israelis for killing Palestinian collaborators, but was released in 2011 during the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange in 2011. Upon his release, however, he quickly ascended through the ranks of Hamas. He ultimately became the leader of the military wing of Hamas in Gaza by 2017. He was very significant in terms of building the military capacities that Hamas had previously held in Gaza, notably in terms of tunnel warfare, drone technology, and rocket production. He had massive hardline stances on the destruction of Israel, essentially, and he was one of the quote-unquote masterminds of the October 7th attack that saw over 1,200 Israelis killed in that surprise assault. Right after this happened, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu basically hailed this as a critical victory, suggesting that it weakened Hamas's military operations, and he's suggesting that it's opening up the possibility that Hamas may be forced to release the remaining Israeli hostages that are being kept. On the other hand, some analysts, myself included, believe that in spite of Netanyahu's optimism, there's a very strong case to be made, and I'll get into why, but this is specifically why this conflict may persist and why these remaining hostages could be executed in the near future. Now, we all know that Hamas's military capabilities have been massively degraded by Israeli strikes throughout Gaza. But as this photo shows, radicalization is an intergenerational process. And we have the dynamics at play by which we might be seeing a more radicalized next generation of Hamas leaders coming up from the ground and coming through the ranks. But this is Rogue Insights presented by Prime Rogue Inc. I'm Kevin Duska, our president and founder. Feel free to drop us a subscribe, a follow, a comment. Let us know what you think. But let's get on with this. So in terms of the militarization of Gaza, it's undoubtable that Yahya Sinwar transformed Hamas from basically a localized militant group into a quasi-military force as part of the quote-unquote legitimately elected leadership of Gaza. His strategies were premised on tunnel warfare, rocket development, and guerrilla tactics to counter Israel's very significant qualitative and quantitative conventional military superiority. Sinwar is best known for being the architect of Hamas's extensive underground tunnel network, which stretched beneath Gaza all the way to Israel, to Israel to a certain extent, but to Egypt, and allowed for the covert movement of weapons, fighters, supplies. These were critical and have been critical to Hamas's survival during many Israeli bombardments, and they enabled the group to launch myriad surprise raids and evade detection. They were also used for kidnapping operations in many cross-border attacks, which are still a hallmark of Hamas's approach to warfare. Under Sinwar, Hamas massively increased the size of its rocket arsenal, and it evolved from being a purely short-range, imprecise thing based on Katyushas and other pretty crappy rockets, to longer-range rockets that were capable of striking deep within Israel. Sinwar oversaw smuggling operations that funneled Iranian-made weaponry into Gaza, and this significantly enhanced the threat that Hamas posed to Israeli cities. And part of his vision was for continuous attrition warfare against Israel. And again, from the OSINT defender, just to show you the degree to which Sinwar was hated, this is some footage from Tel Aviv tonight that you can see. Got a little bit of a party going on there. because as the leader of Hamas's military wing, Sinwar played a dual role. He balanced military operations and also shaped the group's broader political agenda. So he had connections with the political leadership in terms of bridging factionalism within the organization, but he was very ruthless in terms of consolidating power within Gaza and within Hamas. He purged dissenters, executed rivals, and this is what allowed him to secure his control over the militant infrastructure in the region. He also had very close ties to Iran. Sinwar was seen as a key conduit for basically arming and supporting the Palestinian militant groups, I should say. And under his leadership, Iran was capable of funneling millions of dollars in aid, weapons, technology, new rockets, etc., to strengthen Hamas's capabilities as one of Iran's top proxies. So what does the death of Sinwar mean for Hamas? In simple terms, it means that it's just lost its top military commander, and it's likely going to create some operational challenges. He wasn't only involved in day-to-day decision-making, but also held the respect of Hamas's military cadres, notably because of the execution by Israel of so much of Hamas's top leadership. So, without a clear successor in place, especially one with Sinwar's military expertise, what I predict is that Hamas is likely to experience a significant decentralization or devolution of command. So, local Gaza-based commanders operating independently without cohesive strategic oversight might adopt more aggressive attack strategies, producing erratic violence and uncoordinated but potentially large-scale attacks on Israeli positions. This could also create a succession crisis. Most of his potential successors have already been killed by Israel. So this leaves Khaled Mashal, and I don't know if anyone wants the job, but this guy who's based in Qatar is a potential political leader for Hamas, but he's distant from Gaza and he has no military command experience. So with Ismail Haniyeh killed earlier this year, dead, and Sinwar dead, Hamas's leadership is surely going to struggle to unify under a single command, and this opens the door for internal rivalries that will potentially complicate the future of the organization. At the same time, though, the vacuum left by Sinwar's death and the lack of a clear chain of succession within Hamas could lead to more radicalized leaders within Hamas, younger commanders especially, who might prioritize aggressive retribution based on the rapid radicalization that they have experienced. So this could lead to riskier, more extreme tactics, suicide operations, escalated rocket attacks, and other forms of violent retaliation against Israeli targets. The thing is, we know Hamas still has the weapons, but are they capable of getting through the massive Israeli occupation of Gaza that remains ongoing? But from a regional perspective, Haniyeh is dead. Hassan Nasrallah, the long-standing leader of Hezbollah, was assassinated almost a month ago. So this is a pretty catastrophic blow to Iran's proxy forces in the region. Nasrallah, who had led Hezbollah since the early 90s and transformed it into a powerful military and political entity in Lebanon alike, was a key figure along with Haniyeh and Sinwar in terms of Iran's strategy against Israel. So when we combine the fact that Nasrallah, Haniyeh, and Sinwar are dead, we are seeing a leadership crisis that is beginning to permeate all of the axes of resistance. And Iran might thus need to reassess its regional strategy, given that its key allies and proxies are in complete disarray. That said, I anticipate that Tehran is probably going to double down, especially with an Israeli retaliation pending, and it will support remaining leaders and provide them with the same weapons, fundings, and political backing it historically has. So this does have a potential, along with the death of Nasrallah, the coming Israeli response to provoke Hezbollah, to provoke Hamas, to seek revenge against Israel through missile attacks on northern Israel, and other erratic, decentralized actions. Now that they've cut the snake's head off of both Hamas and Hezbollah, I don't think we're going to see the same type of command and control and same type of coordination of operations that we've seen in the past, notably October 7th, which is a highly coordinated operation, which despite significant Israeli failures, still occurred because it was, for all intents and purposes, quite well planned. But to the hostages, and I'm going to roll some B-roll here of blah, blah, blah. the Israeli General Ravid talking to some troops, and these are the guys who were involved in the elimination of Sinwar. And as you can tell, they look both moved and exhausted at the same time. They've been fighting a ground campaign there. I think many of them are reservists for quite a bit of time. But this does complicate the hostage situation, which is ostensibly one of the main reasons for operations in Gaza. So, despite the fact that Netanyahu is suggesting that this could lead to the hostage is being released, the reality might be far more dangerous. There's a very strong risk that Hamas, with nothing to lose, could execute the remaining hostages as retribution. This is a tactic that's been used by military groups in the past when their leadership has been attacked. Given that Sinwar was deeply involved in past prisoner exchanges and orchestrated these kidnapping operations, they've lost a key negotiator, which could stall any back-channel talks being facilitated by Qatar, Turkey, or Egypt, who previously mediated between Israel and Hamas. We also have some footage of Netanyahu giving a speech a little bit earlier where he's basically going through the body count that has been produced by Israeli troops in targeted assassinations. But Israel's going to continue operating in the Gaza Strip, and so far they've been relatively unsuccessful in finding hostages, unless they were dead. So Israel can claim a significant victory, notably in as much as this was apparently not planned. And the IDF will likely intensify ground operations in Gaza, all the while they're also up tempoing them in southern Lebanon to take advantage of the disarray that's present now within Hamas leadership. But the future of these hostages and the future of the region is significant. When we combine the deaths of Sinwar, Haniyeh, and other high-ranking officials in Hamas and Hezbollah, we're likely to see internal fractures, fragmentation, and more radical and unpredictable attacks. Khaled Masal, who I said is based in Qatar, could attempt to assert authority over Gaza and Hamas within it, but it's unlikely that the numerous factions that fall within Hamas would respond to this. But Hamas will need to rebuild its leadership hierarchy, and this could take months or years. So its ability to engage in a large-scale coordinated attack is going to be diminished during this period, even though it could do something like execute the hostages. So in the absence of centralized control from Hamas itself, affiliates in the West Bank and Lebanon could become more involved in revenge. For Israel, this is an opportunity and a dilemma. On the one hand, eliminating Sinwar, Nasrallah, Haniyeh, etc. weakens these proxies, but it also creates uncertainty how the conflict will evolve. With regards to the ground offensive, the focus is going to remain on neutralizing Hamas military infrastructure, so the tunnel networks, rocket launch sites, and what is left of its leadership. But considering the deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, there's also going to be an even greater pressure to balance military objectives with, the international backlash that is already ongoing as France is calling for a boycott of Israel. Without leadership, it's also more difficult for an entity like Hamas to become engaged in third-party negotiations for a peace process. So it's uncertain what will occur, but it's very possible that we're actually going to see an escalation or an uptick in violence within the region, albeit in a less organized fashion, as Hamas's ability to even speak as a single entity is likely to be fragmented, and as junior commanders will probably seek revenge for what's happened. But the deaths of Sinwar, Haniyeh, al-Awluri, and other Hamas leaders, combined with the death of Hassan Nasrallah, have left a leadership vacuum that is permeating the Iranian axis of resistance. So without experienced leaders, Hamas is facing fragmentation, disarray. We're likely to see radical revenge, decentralized, but the IDF does maintain military dominance in Gaza. This is likely to persist. Netanyahu's government is going to face growing pressures, especially with this revenge strike or retaliatory strike on Iran pending, but it's unclear what this is going to lead to, as to whether it produces ceasefire talks or not, and as to whether the hostages survive or are killed in the next 24 to 48 hours. But Iran's proxies are going to need to realign. I think Tehran is probably going to double down on arming Hamas, Hezbollah, and whatever else emerges from this because of the intergenerational cycle of radicalization via the latter method. But Iran could always shift its focus to other areas like Syria or Iraq and adopt a more defensive posture while it rebuilds offensive capability in the region. But the long-term implication of this is that basically the absence of any stable leadership within Hamas and Hezbollah is going to enhance the instability and potential rogue actions taken by splinter factions within them, making it difficult to predict what's going to happen to Israel and how Israel will respond. So the risk of seeing a prolonged insurgency-style conflict, self-perpetuating war, continues to grow. And this ties in with the forever war dynamic that I've spoken about in the past with regards to what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza. If you like this content, please subscribe, drop us a like, drop us a follow, drop us a comment. Check out the books in the description below. Check out our website. It is 12:11 p.m. on the 17th of October here in Calgary, Alberta. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.